stories this morning, they're really, I mean, it's really tough in so many ways. We've talked about these terrible crimes that have taken place, also what's going on the global stage. Now, when I woke up this morning, the story that's leading the news in many news outlets is the United States has dropped more than 125 bombs on Iran's military and allies in Iraq and in Syria as a retaliation for attacks on American troops. Now, the US bombers flew across the Atlantic, some of them. They hit more than 85 targets in Iraq and Syria, including sites held by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Now, this is obviously retaliation on the back of 160 attacks on American forces. We saw those young, really young 3 soldiers being killed as well. And Biden actually said, and I said this at the beginning of the programme, a very pertinent comment. If you harm an American, we will respond. I'm nervous this is escalating, and very, very quickly.
Absolutely. I think that is the danger, and the thing that everybody's worried about is that, you know, all of this escalation, there seems to be masses of it going on at the moment in multiple different areas of the world, and essentially this stuff compounding against each other causes bigger problems. But it is a difficult one because, you know, the United States are there, they're getting attacked consistently, and they do have to protect themselves and protect their bases. So it's a very, very difficult one. I think the Biden comment, the way he positioned the comment was, look, we don't want to be escalating, we don't want to be positioning war, but we do have to protect our soldiers. That was the comment, right?
And that's probably a very strong point, actually. It's about a show of defiance, because I'm not sure Iran actually wants to get involved in this. Now, we know that all of those groups are sponsored by Iran, whether it's the Houthis or whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or whoever it is. But just in terms of this, the United Kingdom, we're now sending another aircraft carrier to the Red Sea to replace the USS Dwight Eisenhower. It's thought either going to be the HMS Prince of Wales or the HMS Queen Elizabeth. At the end of the day, they're protecting the Red Sea, and obviously this is a hugely important shipping lane. Where do you stand on where we are, how we de-escalate this? Because that has to be the outcome that everyone needs.
Yes, I think Adam kind of summed it up nicely in that what America is doing is reactive to the attacks on the US troops, and obviously they do have to and want to respond to that. It is sort of striking how kind of sort of desensitized we've become to this sort of news. I mean, like, America's been bombing the Middle East pretty much my entire life. So when you sort of see headlines that it's, you know, that it's been happening last night, you're kind of like, oh, so what's going on now? I think the sort of question is, what's the sort of long-term strategy? What's the end game? Is it just to sort of contain Iran and, you know, step in if they really step out of line? As you say, these are the attacks are on like Iran-linked militias, as opposed to Iran. They've said they're not going to attack Iran itself.
Iran stepping out of line. What does that look like to you?
Well, it's these Iranian-backed militias attacking the US, attacking the shipping lanes, as you were just saying. There's also the question of how much control over them Iran actually has, because, as you say, they're Iranian-backed. They get their sort of money and weaponry from Iran. But there's been a lot of discussion recently about how much control Iran actually has over them, and whether they, you know, whether they're sort of a little bit
Iran says
going
it was
off
not
doing their own
responsible.
thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
They're sort of, you know, they're denying the responsibility. And as I say, a lot of people are saying now that, you know, do the Houthis, the groups in Iraq, in Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, does Iran actually have that much, you know, complete authority over them?
And you mentioned that actually it was I think it was a considered response. I think Biden and the security team actually took time to decide what to do here. It's not the end of these strikes as well. Yeah. Just in terms of this, I mean, we've obviously got this ongoing conflict, haven't we, with Israel, and that is at the base of this. And I just don't know what that resolution is. So the two-state solution has been widely mooted as the way to go. Netanyahu's been very, very clear that is not happening on his watch. Also, he wants Israel to be in charge of security in a Palestinian state. I don't understand how that could possibly work.
Well, it's all very, very difficult, the politics of it all. I think the danger is, you know, two different things there. The strikes, if they continue these strikes and they continue attacking, all of this just compounds and gets worse. And yeah, all right, Iran are saying they're not responsible for this in the moment, but then what happens when they go and hit the next thing and the next thing? You're just continually creating conflict and it just making it worse. It's difficult. I think you've got to do everything you can to go in, solve these problems in the most diplomatic way possible, because there's no point in people just keep getting killed all the time and having this mass escalation.
I agree. I just don't know how diplomacy works. Now, also on the back of that, General Sir Patrick Sanders, head of the army, has warned we are not spending enough money on defence. So at the moment we have 75,000 troops in the army. By 2034, in 10 years' time, we'll only have 52,000. We've only got 29,000 in the Navy. There's a really interesting article where he says Britons need to be very clear about the threats that this country faces, and we need to be ready for war. Do you think we could be ready for war?
Well, I think what's kind of interesting, this, I'm going to slightly sort of take it off a tangent, if it's okay, but I think it's important and related, is that in my work we do a lot of work on taxation, the super rich, and when you talk about that, people sort of jump up and down, and they don't like taxes. They don't want to sort of punish people who are perceived as being successful or entrepreneurial or whatever. But how do we fund the armed forces, the police, the border force, all these things that are in crisis at the moment? The NHS education service with schools crumbling as well. You've got sort of towering wealth being concentrated in this sort of tiny elite over here, and then you've got stagnating living standards, crumbling public services over here.
But you say that, but actually,
are we not going to use? Are we not going to put the two and two together?
It's what I would say, Nate. You're talking about terrible living standards. If we can't protect ourselves, those living standards are going to get a lot
of course,
worse.
But it's kind of the same.
Right?
But it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Like we've got, I
think there's nothing more important than actually defending. With all of this conflict going on in the world, they need to be focused on how do you improve our security.
And that's 100%. The nub, isn't it, Andrew? Yeah. That's the nub, because without defence, without security, you've got nothing.
No.
I completely agree, but you've got to fund it.
But but we have the highest tax burden.
But then your
we've
first instinct is go to the super rich.
We've got a low tax burden compared to a lot of the Western world.
Nothing works in a vacuum, and you're right. It doesn't mean you're excluding one, but it's not just about our defence. The trouble is we're financing policing the world, aren't we? We're supplying weapons to other countries and so on and so forth. And what you need to do, all of those things are right. We need to make sure there's relevant standards of health, of education and so on, and relevant facilities, but it's within that. We also must ensure that we are safe. But you need to look at the whole picture, not just an isolated incident.